Hey, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, no problem, Jason. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm well. I can you tell the viewers or listeners if they're just going to listen who you are and what institution you're with?
Sure. My name is Ken Hickman. I'm presently the director of the Penn State All Sports Museum, at University Park campus, here in snowy central Pennsylvania.
How long have you been there?
It will be 15 years in about 2 weeks.
Wow, 15 years.
Yeah, time just kind of slides by if you're not careful.
And you had traveled up for I mean that position or
Yeah.
okay.
My wife and I are both alumni. So, when the opportunity came along, we were looking, we were looking to settle someplace, where we could, start a family, um, in some place that was comfortable with good schools and kind of all the amenities you're looking for.
What is the museum? I mean, what are some of its primary roles in the community or what you do?
Yeah, it's our primary mission is to tell the stories and highlight the accomplishments of all of Penn State's student athletes, past and present. Yeah, it's we'll do that through a lot of the traditional approaches, whether it's exhibits, programming, specialized tours, community outreach. It's because we're part of the athletic department, and we also have a secondary function as as a recruiting tool for our varsity coaches. It's some place that a coach can bring a prospective student athlete,
Hmm.
kind of talk about the history of their program, where the program's been, um, talk about where they'd like to take it. Maybe you can be on the wall someday, kind of
Yeah.
thing, and
Does it have a
kind of give
Hall
them
of
the full
Fame
sales
component
pitch.
to it that you manage?
Say again.
Does the museum have a Hall of Fame component that you manage or?
Uh, we do not at the present time.
Okay.
There was a thought when the museum was founded in 2002 that was kind of not in the Penn State team first spirit. You
Okay.
know, um, that I think that perspective has changed. It is something we're looking into. We've put together a full plan. It just needs administrative approval at this point. That we could roll out Hall of Fame concept probably within 3 years. If we were greenlit and funded, do it.
But you would, I mean, you'd have to manage the new space for that and everything, right? The outreach
Oh,
and
yeah, and it's the obvious part is the space and the facility component, but the what we found is really the trickiest piece. And talking from other universities that have them, it is really developing the back of house infrastructure in terms of what is the criteria for inauguration, what is the selection process, um, who's going to vote. Actually, is there going to be a vote or is it just going to be picked? You know,
mm,
if there's a vote, who votes? Um, what do you do to make sure that because we cover all sports, as most university ones do, how do you make sure that there's a balance so it's not at Penn State it's not all football, or at
mm,
Indiana it's not all basketball.
right.
That's you want to make sure that there's a sport and a gender balance as in terms of the classes that are coming in.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, in you see in other institutions where they'll have a Hall of Fame for their community of, historical figures, and you got to be careful with that too.
I mean, there's a lot of pros, and I would love to have that annual inauguration event because it gives your organization that one weekend a year that that you will be front and center. That you're putting the spotlight on yourself. Um, that obviously is a great fundraising opportunity as well. And there's all the PR and press leading up to that weekend, to call attention to the
Hmm.
organization. But the back end is tricky because you need to have those processes perfectly ironed out. Or what really should be a great goodwill opportunity, can start making people annoyed very quickly about, why didn't I get in, or why did so and so get in when I hit more home runs or scored more goals? And
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
so you need to be able to say, here's the criteria. This is what we're going by. This is what the committee is looking at. And I'm sorry. We already had a men's soccer player this year, and it was this guy who, if we look at the stuff, and had better numbers than you, but like next year, like you could be next year.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's and so much of it, like, so and this applies to so many other things. It's just like it's being transparent and honest and making sure that that process is as clear cut, and that there's no shadowy corners where something weird could happen. That it's just all above board.
Right.
And people don't need to know who voted for him or who didn't vote for him, but they need to understand what the process was and why it functions the way it does.
Yeah. So rewinding a little bit, uh, how did you, what career path did you take to land there up at Penn State?
Yeah. And I did the full-time graduate school path first, straight out of undergrad. I came from Penn State, straight to University of Delaware, for a master's in history and a certificate in museum studies. Um, had a great time with the museum program there. Though I have some criticisms of the certificate approach.
Hmm.
I never felt that it provided enough depth coming out. But I was fortunate enough that straight out of grad school, um, I was able to get a curatorial position at the American Merchant Marine Museum up at the Merchant Marine Academy in Long Island. So
Okay.
I was able to go straight from Newark with about maybe 6 weeks in between, to starting up there. So I was looking at a collection that really had not been touched in eons. When I don't know, I think I just turned 24, like straight
This
out of
is
grad school.
like an entry level curatorial position, or?
Well, I was the curator. I was responsible for all of the collections. We had a
Okay.
full-time staff of three, and that was our director, myself, and full-time administrative assistant. Then a part-time registrar, who was my age, and he wasn't it wasn't super experienced either.
Hmm.
And a part-time membership person. So it was really incumbent on me to come in and try to get some sort of intellectual control in place, get some sort of preservation process in place, because the storage conditions were not good, and it was very much everything was piled up in the basement
Yeah.
type of situation. There were some water issues. Like we had a flood while I was there. That was all kinds of fun.
Yeah. Oh my
Uh,
goodness. Well, for
so
the for the lay person that who might be listening, my understanding is, and Ken, you can expand on this, intellectual control, it pertains to all of that documentation, provenance, deed of gifts, the paperwork involved with why we have something, and there's a thing called physical control collections too, which is, all the physical, is it being preserved and stored in the right manner? Yeah.
so we I came in, and my registrar and I, we had minimal intellectual control. We had a composition book that was, and like, it was an acquisitions register, and we had to go from there, kind of literally going through closets, going through rooms in the basement, trying to just wrap our heads around what we had.
What
And
and what was the main collection again? What
oh,
was its content?
I mean, it was everything from um, ship models and ship plans to um, ship's wheels, propellers, binnacles, um, all sorts of cruise line, shipping line, ephemera. Whether it's like menus, drink stirs,
Oh, From
And
the area, from the region, or?
well, all American flag shipping companies.
Okay.
Um, and like one of the biggest collections we had was an archival collection that when United States lines folded in the 1980s, the Academy received a phone call and said, send a bunch of trucks and take whatever you want out of the building because it's all getting liquidated and the company
Yeah.
is done. So I mean that included things not just from USL but from all their predecessors back into the 19th century. And so we had things as modern as a full set of construction plans for SS United States from the 40s back to boxes and boxes and boxes of handwritten passenger lists from Red Star, White Star, American Lines, all the predecessor companies that were ultimately funneled into becoming USL. So I mean, I always got a kick going through this passenger list because that's frontline primary immigration history right there.
Wow.
Because they were the composition books that as you went on board,
Okay.
the officer would have written your name down and first class, second class steerage, what have you.
And the date range was what? I mean, going back to.
I mean back into the 1880s.
Wow. So it captured a lot of that late 1800s, early 1900s
Yeah.
immigration rush.
And I think when we finally boxed that collection, it was something like 500 or 600 of the normal size document boxes.
Wow.
Again, the 5-inch width. I just remember we
Wow.
had a mountain of these things in our, we were able to get a couple upstairs rooms to convert into better storage. I just remember having a mountain of these boxes on the floor as we were getting ready to shelve them all. And
Oh, that's amazing.
and our director's looking at me. She's like, "You need how much money again to buy folders? You need special folders? We need special. Yes, Linda, we need special folders. You need how many boxes?
So from there you went on to what? Where did you go from there?
Uh, I was at Kings Point for about a year. When I got a job as a curator at the USS Constellation in Baltimore, which for those who don't know, it's the tall ship right in the corner, of the inner harbor there. It's the last all sail warship built for the U.S. Navy. That entered service in the 1850s, and the big task there was, and we were literally trying to restore that ship back to its 1860s appearance, and it is the last ship that that saw active service during the Civil War that is still afloat.
Okay.
And Constitution was commissioned, was still in the Navy, but it was serving as a training ship. And Constellation was actually on patrol in the Mediterranean during the war. And that, and the way I usually try to communicate like what dealing with a historic ship is like. It's like caring for a historic house, but just a lot more expensive.
It's floating
Because
on something.
so it's a mobile historic house, but it's like people joke about their boats being like holes in the water that they throw money into. Well, just scale it up. you and so what we were doing there was going through the interior of the ship, restoring one space at a time.
Wow.
I was handling the history side. We had an extremely gifted restoration crew that could do the woodworking, fabricate anything we needed to have fabricated. Could replicate anything.
So sorry to cut you off. You would tease out of the documents and the history what was there, and then pass that information on to the other crew.
As long as I could find construction drawings of something, we had the guys who could make it.
Wow.
And the first project we did there, my first year, was we restored the ship's captain's cabin. And we were fortunate to have had both the Navy's regulations for what a ship of that size should have in that space, plus documentation from the two captains during the Civil War to give us a little bit more of a personalized feel of what they had brought with them.
Hmm.
So we were able to take that space from really just being the original bulkheads that were in place but kind of beat up to using the Secretary of Interior's guidelines for historic vessel preservation. We were able to take that space back to what it would have looked like in the 1860s.
Mm-hmm.
And I can still remember, because I would have been probably 25 or so, the night we opened that, sitting in that space thinking, wow, we just did something meaningful and important. Like, if this is maintained, it should be like this forever.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
did that.
Historic Ships, was that a nonprofit group?
At the time, it was just Constellation. We were the USS Constellation Museum, but we were a subsidiary of another nonprofit in Baltimore City, Living
Oh.
Classrooms Foundation.
Which foundation? I didn't hear you.
The Living Classrooms Foundation.
Okay.
Their focus is, I suppose, doing experiential education for at-risk youth. And they had picked up Constellation as a subsidiary, and at the time, what was then the Baltimore Maritime Museum, which is the lightship, the Coast Guard cutter, the submarine Torsk, and a lighthouse. And since I moved on, they've all been condensed into historic ships.
Okay. All right. Was that a financial, from what you can remember, a financial decision, or?
Yeah, I think it was. There had been, after I left, there had been some collective staff turnover in both institutions. And I think they figured out that it may be more economical to bring everything into one unit, and rather than have two curators, have one with an assistant.
Yeah.
Instead of having development people at each site, bring those together and so forth.
Yeah. So you're in a unique setting now, because I guess you don't really have a nonprofit board, correct? I mean,
No, it's we operate with an advisory board. That I've tried since I came in 2006 to build that group into as close to a real board as we can.
okay.
We run our meetings like you would run a nonprofit board meeting. The one difference is they all understand that at the end of the day, if they make a decision and the athletic director says no, that's
Sure.
that's the final say.
Yeah.
But it's helped us to have that outside perspective and have some oversight.
Yeah. How many people serve on that advisory board?
Usually about 16.
Okay. So
Yeah,
not.
and we try to draw from both on campus and off, and from within and without the department, just to have a variety of perspective.
There are a lot of university affiliated or run museums in the country. I mean, there's got to be thousands of them. I mean, and even though their subject matter might be a little bit different, you probably have some thoughts about the pros and cons of those, what it's like to manage that group.
Yeah, and one of the great advantages is, and you're never that concerned about kind of the basic things. And the lights aren't going to go out. The plumbing's not going to explode.
Mm-hmm.
All of those kind of very base level elements, are covered by the parent institution.
Mm-hmm.
Like in our case, we're built into Beaver Stadium. I maintain a maintenance budget, but it's for little things, like there's a problem with the toilet.
Okay.
Even then, I can call, I'll put a work order into our Office of Physical Plant. They will send a plumber to fix it. Um, but if there's a giant hole in the roof, that falls under building maintenance within the departments. That's not my problem. I will talk with our facilities office, but they will eat cost on that. They will send the work guys to come fix it.
Yeah.
It's the bigger challenge, and the challenges you tend to face in terms of the facilities are more frequently, particularly with more mid and small size sites. You're often in space that was not designed for the purpose it's being used.
Okay. Why is that?
Now, in a lot of cases, it's a department decided to start a museum. They had space in their building to do it. They're going to convert, say, I don't know, 3 classrooms to do it. And that's great, but things like the HVAC are still the standard HVAC for the building.
That were there originally for the classrooms.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And frequently, there's not funding, to put in a specialty system, to provide the perfect environment you might want.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times you'll see situations where those types of organizations are started by very well-intended, good-natured folks, but who don't have the expertise in the first place to know that we need to create the appropriate environment. We need to have the right kind of cases. We need to store the collection in the right kind of way, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
They're very focused on the public facing rather than the infrastructure that needs to be there. What we've found, because our space was built as museum space, but there was not that professional expertise on or within the group when the project was moving forward. So, we've spent probably 10 years working with our physical plant folks to jury rig, manipulate, and play with the HVAC system because it was not independent from our part, from our quadrant of the building.
Mm-hmm.
So it's our galleries run off of the general HVAC, and there was, I think my first or second year, we were having humidity fluctuations through the year. That were so bad, we had wallpaper coming off the walls.
Wow.
Like vinyl graphics that had been applied, all the seams would pop, and
Yeah.
it was sitting down with the technicians, saying like, what can we do to, if the fluctuation is 75% now, what are some easy things we can do to maybe get it to like 35%? Let's see if we can start by cutting it sort of in half and then go from there.
Well, and times have you would think times have changed a lot. I mean, a lot of the places that were, started up 20 plus years ago, like you were saying, there's nothing against the folks that they had a lot of passion, and it was great that they did what they did, but just wasn't part of the MO to make sure you had a museum consultant, that sort of thing. Yeah.
And so we saw it to some degree in Kings Point as well. That museum was in a converted historic mansion.
Okay.
So we were operating with the building systems that were built into that house.
Mm-hmm.
So the boiler in the basement was probably at least 70, if not 80 years old. I don't think it was original, but it wasn't far off. I was like, well, this is an adaptive reuse of a historic property that will make it work.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
Huh.
I think we've joked before that it's part of working, in a smaller mid-sized organization is finding ways to make good out of bad, and you know, find ways to use what you have to get where you need to be.
Do you find that maybe it depends on the initiative or program, but I would think maybe um, running things up the flagpole could go quicker, or depends on the program. Maybe it goes slower. I mean, what have you been your experience there with
Yeah,
working with?
it really it depends on, I think, the initiative and the audience that you're bringing it to. One of the downsides to being part of the bigger organization is, it's you're part of a bigger organization, so you don't necessarily have the independence to be as agile as you might be as a private nonprofit. I mean, that's what you give up to have the security.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, in our case, if we want to do a new program that is outside of our footprint, within stadium, that's a conversation with our facilities folks, with our marketing folks,
Mm-hmm.
to make sure, it's working with, the other folks in the building to look at the building's calendar. What else is going on in the building? You know, is
Yeah.
that date open to do what we want to do? That sort of thing. Um, Sometimes that process can be very easy. Sometimes you really got to sell folks that on why, it's, you know, in a way, it's like almost doing like a corporate proposal of some sort of, sitting down with one of these administrators and saying, this is what we want to do. This is why it's a good thing
Yeah.
for us. This is why it can benefit you. This is why we'd like you to say, hey, it's okay for you to go do this sort of thing.
How does fundraising work in a setting like that? Do you have to? I mean,
Creatively,
yeah.
um, it's, all of the museums, on our campus at least, for, if you're going to look at traditional development, or corporate, that sort of thing, you're going to have to work through your unit's development office.
Right.
It needs to be funneled through that process. Um,
Yeah, John Deere might be sponsoring the next game, and you don't want
yeah.
to be going after them for some capital project or something.
Well, and the way some of the development works here as well is, I may want, you may be a wealthy alum. I may want to come to you with an idea, but if you graduated from the College of Liberal Arts, you may belong to them as a donor. So I would have to go to Liberal Arts' permission, to their office, and get permission to even talk to you.
Hmm.
Because they have first dibs, since you're one of their alum. Um, things like grants. Um, you need to work through the university's grant system.
Yeah.
And it's a couple layers of bureaucracy that need to be navigated. Because the university needs to keep track of who's asking for money from who and when. That way, not so much in the museum world, but it keeps the academic departments from hitting up, say, NIH or NSF for lots and lots of money for very similar projects.
Yeah.
When our sponsored programs office would have caught that before they went out and said, hey, you guys should probably get together and do a joint proposal.
Yeah.
So we're not competing against ourselves.
What other museums are on the in the campus system?
It's, we have a pretty hefty list.
Oh,
It's, the big one, I think, like at most campuses, is our art museum. The
okay.
Palmer Museum of Art is the heavy hitter. Um, we're probably number two in terms of size,
Okay.
in athletics. Then I would say that, there's a tier right below that is our Earth and Mineral Sciences,
Okay.
museum. It's they. I don't want to say I don't want to say they do natural history, but that's part of what they do. They
Yeah.
really try to cover um, kind of the full breadth of what that college offers. Um, we have a um, very well known within its community entomology museum. Yeah, so if you ever want to see
Is
more
that
bugs,
bugs?
oh yes, if you want to see more bugs than you ever care to, they will hook you up.
Yeah.
Just like if you want like a bug show at your kid's next birthday party. I mean, one of their outreach things is they will come bring like the hissing cockroaches and things. Do a kind of a hands-on thing for you.
Yeah.
And we have an agricultural museum outside of town. As well as a number of historic structures. I mean, it's really a surprisingly long list.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, if there's students and professors, or maybe the professors that want to give students an experience working in museums or the public history arena, I imagine that's probably a pro. I mean, getting that aligned is a little easier, maybe.
it is. We for a number of years have had, I think, a very strong and healthy relationship with our history department. They're the fellow who oversees their intern program at this point is now a friend. Um, and it's he's provided a number of just really exceptional interns for us through the
Hmm.
years. Um, and one of the interesting conversations we've had is, and probably one of the flip side of the intern coin is, I think there's a propensity for some folks to take the attitude of, well, if you're on a college campus, can't you get interns to do everything and save a lot of
Mm,
money?
right. That's
No,
not fair.
because I think, as we both know, interns are not free. At the very least, if they're only doing it for credit, it still takes a great deal of your time to set up the project, supervise your work, and so forth.
And you want a meaningful project,
Yes,
and they want a meaningful
yes.
project.
Like,
Yeah.
there have been one or two projects we've done in the past where I had to create the project for them. And they did a great job. They enjoyed it. But I'm like, that we really didn't necessarily need to have that done, but I wanted you to have something. And I feel bad that it didn't necessarily have the meat that it might have, you know, otherwise. And,
Yeah.
but, one of the interesting things that has come out of it is there's just a general lack of willingness on the part of students, to
Mm.
engage, with internships. A conversation our coordinator and I had one day boiled down to, he's like, out of all the hundreds of kids in our department, I feel like I have a group of like 15 or 20 that I would call professional interns.
Mm.
Where every opportunity, they're on it. They're in his office. What can I go do? What can I go do?
Yeah.
And he's like, but with the rank and file students, you know, getting them out and getting them engaged to come do these things is becoming increasingly a challenge. And we were
Mm.
talking about different communication methods, because he's like, I send the emails, and I feel like the emails just go
Hmm.
right on by. And I'm like, well, we have a new career services system, and we talked through what some of the options might be.
Mm.
But it was a kind of a curiosity that at a point in time where those kind of experiences are probably more necessary than ever in terms of your
Mm.
resume, it's odd that it's proven so difficult, to get numbers, to
Yeah.
turn out.
Now that's a big talking point in the museum community about paid versus unpaid internships,
Yeah.
and some of the controversy involved with not paying interns, and of course in the university saying imagine, it's more of a possibility to give them something. Is that true or not true? Or
Um, and it really depends on what the budget situation is. We
hmm.
have a budget for wage payroll, that covers our part-time staff.
Hmm.
Um, so we can always dip into that. And I'm at a point now where that's healthy enough that I like to try to budget for that opportunity.
That's good. Yeah.
'Cause we've been as guilty as a lot of places in the past where it's simply been academic credit. Um, and I will admit, if it's during the school year, I didn't necessarily feel as bad about that because it was just, in a lot of ways, it's just one more class that they were
Mhm.
taking.
Sure.
And their food, their housing, everything was just part of their normal college experience. It wasn't like me coming to you when you were in Carlisle, having to find a place to stay,
Yeah. Over the
to
summer or
intern.
something.
Um, but if it's in the summer, well, moving forward, I would like to make sure that we're paying something,
Yeah.
year round. But I would think, in the past that if it was in the summer, we were making provision, for that, where we could carry them as wage payroll, you know, like any of our gallery staff,
Yeah.
except they're doing this other thing.
Right. How many staff do you have at the museum?
We're 3 full time, 1 3/4 time. Um, then usually between 12 and 15 part time.
Okay.
It just depends on the time of year. Yeah,
Seasonally?
yeah. We'll staff up kind of April through the fall, then fade back a little bit late fall through the winter.
Does it depend on the sports season and people visiting and that sort of thing?
Yeah, we found years and years ago that the visitation January to mid March, midweek was, well, really non-existent.
Mm.
So we run on a shortened schedule, for those, I don't know, about 10 weeks.
Okay.
So where it's just Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
All right.
So we just don't necessarily have the hours to give. And programming will ramp up kind of from the beginning of May through the end of the football season in November.
Hmm.
Then it will ebb back into that kind of winter mode.
Hmm. Do you have students that go on to persevere and work in the museum field?
Yeah, it's a conversation I've had with a number of kids through the years. Um, it usually becomes a series of conversations, because it's I want them to understand what they're getting into. You um, I want to provide the guidance that I didn't necessarily get, and I'm not regretting anything. I just there wasn't necessarily folks along the way back in the '90s
Hmm.
to help show you what the right what the different paths could be. Um, we've had a couple who have gone that route, um, and I think, in all honesty, I think only one is working in the field at the moment.
Okay.
Uh, it's the conversation that I'll usually have with them is, first off, is, are you sure? Are you really sure? Okay. And it's, I, you can do grad school now, you can do grad school later, but you're going to
Yeah.
have to do grad school.
Yeah.
And your two roads really are, um, you can get that museum studies master's, or you can go to a program like Delaware where it's, a certificate, something on the side.
Hmm.
And the upside with the master's program, the straight up master's program, is, they will teach you a little bit of everything. I've always argued you should be able to come out of one of those programs being able to do basic collections care, write a program, write a grant, do some basic administration and some basic marketing.
Hmm.
Um, I'd argue that you should put accounting into it, but that always makes people twitchy. But the trick with that degree is, and that's a pretty single lane degree. That's the road you're on, and The upside to someplace, like Delaware is your master's is going to be in a discipline rather than museum studies. And that was something our program head, Bryant Tolles, way back when was very adamant about. And like I think about the people we had in our class, classes, and it was a lot of history folks, a lot of art history, but there was a couple from geology, a couple MBAs. Um,
Hmm.
it was certainly a little more diverse in terms of the academic background.
Yeah.
But the argument was that, like in our case, well, if you don't want to work in a museum, you have a history degree, you can go be an editor or go take your teaching exams, that sort of thing. You're not going to be locked into the museum world.
Hmm.
Downside is, I've taken any number of marketing, accounting. I started an MBA at one point, that I dropped when we moved up here, just to try to fill in some of the administrative, um, some administrative things that we didn't get,
Sure.
at UD. And
Yeah.
so that's usually the first choice. And depending on how committed they are, let them go from there.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap up, for all those Penn State lovers out there, can you, uh, sports lovers especially, what can you share maybe, I don't know, top 1 to 3 really cool objects that you have in the museum there?
All right. The One of the ones that if we were ever to apply to like mysteries at the museum
Okay.
is in the collection, our first African American letter winner, Wally Triplett, who played back in the late 40s, became the first African American player who was both drafted and played in the NFL. I have his set of contact lenses from his rookie year.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
And as I sit here wearing my contacts, I will tell you that there's no planet that I want to put those contacts in my eyes. And they look like someone took,
For football, he'd put
yeah,
him in for football.
yeah. They look like someone took a clear ping pong ball and cut it in half.
Oh my word.
Because they are substantial.
From what date? Around what time period again?
That should have been early 50s.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they're not like the little like things you
Yep.
buy
They're,
nowadays that you can hardly notice that they're in your eye.
yeah, these are not the ones you'd want to put in on the first of the month and take out on the 30th. And I don't
Wow.
know that I want to put him in at all, but he didn't want to play with glasses, so that this was the option. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the one the fans all like is we have John Cappelletti's Heisman Trophy, from 1973. The
Huh.
one we have on display is a real Heisman. It is from 1973.
Hmm.
It is not the one that Coach Paterno brought back from New York that night. I have that under glass down at our football building.
Okay.
Um, the one we have in the gallery is out. You can touch it. Like the head is all shiny now because people rub it. But yeah, the university, in a bit of foresight, bought a spare,
Oh, okay.
back in 73. So we have the spare out almost in a sacrificial way at this point that you can, touch, interact with, everyone takes their picture doing the pose behind it,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And
Neat.
yeah, it's, and, I think beyond that, we have, one thing we've really tried to do in recent years is use sports as a lens for looking at bigger issues.
Okay.
I think,
Yeah.
look, you can only talk about, we won this game blank to blank so often, and it's just
Yeah.
like that's great. I mean, that's wonderful. But we have almost 150 years of student athletes who've gone on to do all sorts of interesting things.
Yeah.
The department has been involved in all sorts of interesting things.
Yeah.
So um,
That's cool.
Like one collection that just came in around a World War II project we're doing, is a whole set of letters from one of our basketball players, who was shot down over Austria in February 1945, and they're all
Wow.
it's his letters home to his wife, as well as all of the letters, because he was the pilot and the commander on the aircraft. His wife, because of his role on the aircraft, had to coordinate communicating with the other 9 families of the crewmen on board.
Hmm.
So we have all the letters among the
That you sent.
families, and it's some of them are incredibly heartbreaking because 2 of the 10 guys did not survive,
Hmm.
getting out of the aircraft.
Wow.
And you read these letters of, I think one is a wife, the other is a mother, writing to our fellow's wife saying, we can't get any information about our loved one, from the Army. Have you heard anything? Can you write to Jack and ask and find out, did they get out?
Hmm.
You know, Sitting here in 2021, they didn't, but you're kind of reading this in real time, and,
Yeah.
it's
Wow.
powerful stuff.
Yeah. Wow.
But
Well, thank.
it's one of the ways that we can use. We're using basketball to look at, you know something that happened in Europe 80 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thank you for sharing those vignettes. Before we close, I have a lightning round, 3 questions, and you give an answer.
fire
Um,
away.
and you can elaborate or not as much as you want. Um, so the first question is The Shining or Freddy Krueger?
Oh, Shining.
Definitely, huh?
Look, man.
uh,
And The Shining with, a diagonal line to The Simpsons doing the shinning. That's still, I think, the best Halloween one they've ever done.
yeah. All right. I've got a steak or a crab cake.
Oh, crab cake. That's easy.
Was that because your time down south?
Now, it's the time in Baltimore and all the summers I spent crabbing with my grandfather, in Cape May, and that's easy. And
Neat.
I've been picking crab since I was like 3.
Neat. And then, okay, kayaking or running?
Ooh,
You
that's
have to
tougher.
pick
Wow.
one.
Thanks, because I do both a lot.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take my kayak only because there are a few things more relaxing than just floating down,
Yeah.
floating down the lake or floating down the stream.
Well, and I heard, and I knew you were a big runner.
Yeah.
You still
Uh,
run a lot
oh
now?
yeah. I'm finding now that, as we get older, the running and trying to ski as much as I have is not working out so well. So I'm on a little bit of a running sabbatical here till the snow melts.
Ken Hickman, I really appreciate the time that you took out of your day
No
today.
problem, Jason.
Yeah, and I think people will enjoy hearing about the unique setting that you work in, and I think with the stuff that you got into about working with the students, that's really helpful too for students to hear about that
Well,
stuff too.
it's I've always tried to take the attitude of, there were a lot of people, who went out of their way as I was coming through to help out, and it's
Yeah.
just, I've always viewed it as kind of a pay it forward
Yep.
sort of thing. And we have career services and things now, that we didn't have 25 years ago. That, it's like, if they called and asked, can you come do whatever? Like, yeah,
Yep.
let's give these kids as much information and opportunity as we can, because and the
Yeah.
job market wasn't easy for us coming out, and it certainly isn't any better now.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, you have a good rest of your afternoon, and I'm going to stop the recording.
all right, sounds good, buddy.
All right, Ken.
All right, thank you, Jay.
Yep.